What's up everybody, I'm Jaspreet Singh and 2022 is the year of the great. We started off with the great inflation, with inflation breaking record highs, and now we're going back to the great resignation where people are quitting their jobs at some of the fastest rates we've ever seen, and it also applies to C-level executives who are quitting their jobs because they want to spend more time with their families. Or you could just put on a pair of headphones and see your family in the metaverse. But now the great resignation is starting to transform where people aren't just quitting their jobs, they're using this great resignation as an opportunity to get a better pay or a better lifestyle from their job, so they're using it as a negotiating tool. And then you have the great fuel behind the great resignation, which is starting to come back. So this might seem like forever ago, but you might remember in the beginning part of 2022, a lot of companies were telling employees that you have to come back into the office. But then came the Omicron variant, and that was really just raging through the United States, so a lot of companies then delayed going back into the office. These delays were great news for employees because that meant that you can continue doing your morning meetings in your boxers because you can do it on Zoom instead of having to do it in your desk. This great delay to go back into the office really put a big slowdown on the great resignation because people didn't have this burning desire to quit their jobs or leave their jobs because they had that flexibility to work from where they wanted because they could still work from home. But this is where we're really starting to see things change, because now that the cases for this pandemic going down and people are forgetting about the pandemic again and people are taking their masks off, employers and companies are saying you need to get back into the office in something called the great disconnect, where employers are disconnected with what employees want, and this is now starting to refuel the fire behind, well, the great resignation again. As more and more companies are ordering their employees to go back to work, we're starting to see a rise in the great resignation again, where people are saying, I don't want to have to go back into the office. I'm working just fine at home. I like the lifestyle I have at home, and if you're not letting me work from home, then I'm going to look for another opportunity that aligns with my lifestyle. And this is bringing us to the new phase of the great resignation, which is none other than the great upgrade. I told you 2022 was the year of the great, and now this great upgrade that we're seeing is coming at a time where the great inflation is about to get even worse because we have so many things happening around the world which are now contributing to our inflation even more than the super high inflation that we were facing already. Sometimes the best innovation comes from necessity, and when we were going through this pandemic, people weren't able to go into their offices to work, and that's when companies had to be innovative. Either they allow you to work from home or they don't get any work done. So any company that could allow their employees to work from home did. And so now you have the pandemic going on, and a lot of people were able to start working from home for the first time ever. And this became kind of cool because people started to realize, wow, I don't have to drive 30 minutes to work in the morning. I don't have to stand in rush hour traffic. I don't have to fill my gas tank every morning. I can avoid all of that by working from home. And when I work from home, I can wear my boxers in my morning meeting. I can work out in the middle of the day, and I can work till later because I can work on my own schedule. And a lot of people really like that because now you can pick your own schedule. You can work from anywhere you want. You don't have to pay the New York or the San Francisco rent. I mean, if you work in New York and you're working from home, well, technically, you could work out of Mexico if you wanted to. So now you're earning dollars, living off of pesos while you're doing your work off your laptop. Or even if you don't want to leave the country, you can start living the Airbnb lifestyle. Even I did that for a little while. After I got married, my wife and I lived out of Airbnbs for a little bit, and we got to experience different places around the country. Like I spent just over a month living in downtown Chicago, working out of there. I built a makeshift studio in our Airbnb, so I was able to record videos and I was able to work right out of there. But it was really cool because our entire team was working virtually, so I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. This is why I'm such a big fan of this great resignation, because people are starting to realize that there's more to life than just working for a paycheck. You're starting to work with something a whole lot bigger. People are now looking at what kind of lifestyle they're going to get, what type of job they're doing, and what kind of morals their company has. So people are looking at their company much differently now than they were before the pandemic, because now they're not just working for a paycheck, they want to do something that they actually enjoy, and people are willing to take a pay cut for that flexibility to work from home. And if they want to go back into the office, and if they're required to go back into the office, they want to be compensated for this added headache. But not surprisingly, you have some companies that haven't really caught on to this great resignation and the way that the world is shifting. Some companies are convinced that they can get more productivity out of their employees when they're in the office, and other companies just want more control over their employees because when you're in the office, they can control what you're doing. And some companies have gone as far to say in the LA Times that the reason why they're demanding you to go back into the office every single morning is for the sake of your mental health, because you will be much happier if you're required to be in the office every morning at 8:30 and you can't leave until 5:30 p.m. every single day. You can't make this up. These new demands to get people into the office are now refueling the Great Resignation or the Great Upgrade, where people are now starting to renegotiate their jobs, so they're looking for new jobs because they don't want to be required to go back into the office or live a certain lifestyle that they don't want. And it always requires some sort of catalyst. I mean, the easiest way to understand this is just think about what's going on with green energy. Green energy is much more attractive when oil prices are high, because when you have to pay $100 to fill up your gas tank, it's going to be a lot more attractive for you to go out and buy an electric vehicle, because now it's going to save you money in gas, versus when you only have to pay $35 to fill up your gas tank, then you don't really care about driving an electric car because the gas is cheap, and who really wants to drive a car that doesn't make any noise? But the dilemma that we're facing right now is we have less and less people that are unemployed, while companies are still facing a labor shortage and they cannot find enough employees to help staff their companies. Now, at first glance, this might not make any sense. How is it possible that we have less and less people collecting unemployment while at the same time companies are still facing a labor shortage? According to the United States Chamber of Commerce, it's thanks to something called the Great Reshuffle. Isn't that great? Now, obviously, the new unemployment claims don't always show you everybody who's collecting unemployment, but there's a bigger thing going on that you want to pay attention to, because in the year 2020, we saw the most number of people started business ever. We saw a record-breaking number of 4 million new businesses created in 2020 alone. And then in 2021, we broke the record again, because in 2021, 5.4 million new businesses were started. That's almost 10 million new businesses that were created between 2020 and 2021. And this was fueled by the Great Resignation. It was fueled by this great inflation. It was fueled by this great pandemic. And now this great shuffle means that you have a lot of people that are going out on their own, starting their own side hustles, starting their own businesses where they don't need a job like they did before. Now, if you are starting your own business, a little tip: make sure you have your own business bank account that's designed to help you manage your business's finances. If you're looking for some help with that, you can check out our sponsor, NorthOne. NorthOne is designed for businesses to help you manage your business finances right off your phone, and this card right here. So it's super simple to use. It's made for small businesses, and the best part is they're having a giveaway right now where they're giving away $5,000 and some smaller prizes of $500. It only takes 3 minutes to sign up for an account with NorthOne, and this giveaway is ending soon. So if you want to learn more, create a business bank account and see how you can win some of their prizes, I'll put the link to how you can do that with NorthOne down in the description below. In the United States, you have 165 million working adults, and between the last 2 years, between 2020 and 2021, we've seen 9.4 million businesses started. So if you have 9.4 million businesses started, and just assuming that you need one person to run each of these businesses, that means that about 5.5% of the American workforce has left the workforce because now they've started their own side hustle or they started their own business, which is also contributing to this great labor shortage. This is a very important concept to understand because there are two issues that we're facing right now, and it's a double-edged sword. We're facing the issue of inflation, and we're facing the supply chain issues. Now, most of the times when you hear about people talking about the economic issues, when the Fed and the government are talking about what's going on in the economy and inflation, they say that the reason why we're facing these economic issues and the reason why we're facing high inflation is because of supply chain issues. We have a supply chain mess where we don't have employees, where we don't have products, and this is causing the high inflation. But the problem with the statement is not only is it wrong, but it's backwards. The supply chain issues were an effect. It's a side effect. It's a byproduct of inflation. Inflation was not a byproduct of the supply chain issues. The first thing that you have to understand is that inflation, by definition, is when you increase the monetary supply. So when you increase the monetary supply, that's what causes inflation. If you just create more products or don't have products, that's not going to affect the monetary supply unless somebody, aka the Federal Reserve Bank, affects inflation. So what a lot of people keep saying is the reason why the prices of things are going up is because we have a supply chain issue. We have companies that don't have the ability to produce their products, and because they can't produce or source their products, they have to raise their prices, which is causing inflation, but it's actually backwards. The reason why companies are not able to source their products, the reason why they're not able to produce their products is because of inflation. So just go back to 2020 and the early part of 2021. Nobody was working. Nobody was working, which meant nobody was producing anything. So nothing was being created except money. The Fed kept printing money. Typically, when you're not working, you're not producing. And if you're not producing, you have to shrink your lifestyle, which means you're not producing and you're also not consuming. So the economy slows down with the fact that you're not working. But in 2020 and 2021, that's not what happened. The economy slowed down, but the money printing did not. So nobody was producing anything, nothing was being created, but people kept consuming like normal because the Fed kept printing money and you kept getting money in your pockets. So now people had money, but nothing being produced. So if you have money and not producing anything, you can buy things, but you're not producing anything. And if you're buying things but nothing's being produced, what's that going to create? It's going to create a supply chain issue because now you're buying things but nothing's being produced. And if you're buying something without it being produced, eventually you're going to run into an issue because now there's going to be nothing left to buy. So the Fed created inflation by printing money. This then created the supply chain issues, and this triggered the whole financial mess, which is what we're dealing with now, because we're still dealing with the ramifications of all the inflation that we created. But now things are getting even worse because of everything going on overseas, and now the United States government is helping to fund some of the operations overseas. They're helping to fund protection for Ukraine. They're helping to do all of this, which means we're now creating more inflation. And this is going to ultimately make inflation worse in the United States as well, because now we also have rising oil costs, and we are going to see rising grocery prices because we're seeing the prices of wheat and soybeans and pretty much every other commodity go up because of the tensions and because of the war going on in Ukraine and Russia. But there's an even bigger concern here that you really want to start thinking about. I mentioned this back in 2021, and a lot of people didn't understand why I was talking about this trade deficit. But what you have to understand is that now that Russia did something that the United States did not like. Russia invaded Ukraine, the start of the war in Ukraine, and the United States did not like that. We sanctioned Russia. And now you have to imagine that other countries are looking at this saying, oh no, if we do something that the United States does not like, we could risk being sanctioned by the United States. And there are some countries that are very powerful that do not want to be sanctioned by the United States, like China. Because if the United States were to sanction China, China would not be very happy, but China also has a very strong hold on the United States because they're one of the largest holders of United States dollars, and they also are one of the biggest creators of the products that we consume in the United States. So just think about this for a second. We're seeing already what's going on with the United States sanctioning Russia. That's making the prices of pretty much everything in the United States become more expensive. But what happens if China were to get involved? We're already worried about China potentially invading Taiwan. We're worried about China and Russia joining forces. There's a lot of issues going on over there. Without going into the geopolitical issues, if China and the United States were to run into some sort of problems, if China and the United States had some beef and then they sanctioned the United States, because we didn't do something that they liked, or China did something that we didn't like and we got into some beef, and then they did not allow their companies to send products to the United States, now we're in trouble because we're consuming a lot of Chinese products, and China is one of the largest holders of United States dollars. That could really put a strain on the United States economy because, one, we would have a really tough time sourcing products because our biggest manufacturers in the world are no longer giving us stuff because we're not producing a lot of things in the United States, we're producing them in China. And second, if China starts dumping the dollar, which they've already been doing since 2020, Russia and China started dumping the dollar then because they were worried about these type of United States sanctions. If China starts dumping more dollars out of worries of United States sanctions, that could create significantly more inflation because that would dump a lot more dollars into liquidity into our circulation, which means more dollars in circulation, which would then ultimately contribute to higher inflation. So what does all this mean, and what does this have to do with the Great Resignation? Well, we're already facing the price of things growing at the fastest rate since the early 1980s. But now that the prices of things have been growing so fast, you need more money in order to buy things. And the way you make money is by producing something. But companies are struggling producing things because they cannot source their products and they cannot source enough workers to produce their products. And so if they cannot source enough products, or if they cannot source enough workers, they have to pay more money in order to get these things. So if they have to pay more money to attract a worker because of everything going on in the economy, that means now they have higher costs. If a company has higher costs, that means they're going to have to now take this cost and funnel it down to you, the consumer, which ultimately means the price of things are going to go up even more because they weren't able to source the product and they weren't able to source the labor, so they have to raise the price of the already raised price product. So it starts to create a spiral. So you had inflation created by the Federal Reserve Bank, which meant that they created money, gave it to people, and now people had money to spend. This inflation then created supply chain issues, because now that people are buying things and the things being produced, it creates a supply chain issue. But now these supply chain issues are now causing more inflation because companies can't source their products and they cannot source people, and now in order to do that, they have to pay more money in order to create products, because they have to pay more money to the workers and they have to pay more money for the products. So now that this is creating more inflation, it is also creating more of a supply chain issues, which is leading to more inflation. You see how it's creating the spiral, which is just perpetuating again and again and again. And now with everything going on overseas, it's also creating more inflation, which creates more supply chain issues, which causes more inflation. So this is the issue that we're facing right now. And the solution to this is to tighten the monetary supply. You're gonna have to reduce inflation. You're gonna have to reduce the amount of money out there. That means you're gonna have to raise interest rates, which is what the Fed is finally starting to do right now. And if you start to raise interest rates, that's gonna make the economy slow down, because now you have a more expensive cost to borrow money, which slows down this, but it also slows down the economy. But the reason why this is important to understand for the topic of today's video, the Great Resignation, is because now if more people start to quit their jobs again, that would create a bigger mess here, because that would create more issues in the supply chain while we're already facing these issues right now. And if the Fed starts to raise interest rates to fight inflation, that would mean that the economy would start to slow down. And if the economy starts to slow down while more and more people are quitting their jobs, this creates a bigger mess in the economic system. So these are things that you want to pay attention to, because this is what's going on right now, and we're going to really start to see the effects of this over the next 3 to 6 months or so. So you definitely want to pay attention to what's going on, and I'll be keeping you updated on our channel, which is why if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that. If you like what you saw, here's a video on Ray Dalio's message to investors, and while you're at it, if you want to start generating passive income, you can do my free guide on passive income by clicking that button below. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep hustling. Think about it this way. Imagine that I'm your employee, you're my boss, and my job is to take this marker and move it from my right hand to the left hand. You own a marker factory,